Today, I'm going to be sharing with you my process for how I created this fantasy landscape painting. Right off the bat, I'm slapping some gray blue into the sky. I like to keep my horizons really bright and the tops of my skies really dark. Sometimes I like to make the horizons of my sky almost white. I also like to make sure that I have a lot of really nice color variation in my sky. So you see me here, I'm throwing in some red into the sky. Looking at this in hindsight, I actually even wish I would have thrown a little bit more red into the sky. I decided that the top of the sky was a little bit too bright and the corner was a little bit too bright, so I went in there with some black and decided, you know what, let's add this kind of like a vignetting effect. And when I had the black on my brush, I decided, you know what the heck, let's add in some clouds let's add in some shadows for some clouds that we're going to be adding in here in just a second. And here we are adding the clouds. This is probably my favorite way to add in clouds. I know it's a really simple and easy way to add clouds. Just take paint, put it on the end of a fan brush and swirl it around. And it's just such a simple and easy way to make clouds. It's just one of my favorite ways. I really like to layer it a lot, and so when I do it this way, and so this is me here, I'm blending out the bottoms of these clouds so I can add layer after layer after layer of these clouds. That's what I think makes these skies just look so fascinating. Really, any part of any painting look fascinating is just adding these layers. These clouds at the bottom I want to look really far away, so I'm making sure to make them really small, and I'm blending them out actually quite a bit. I'm making sure that their features aren't sharp at all. And here in a minute I'm going to be adding some shadows to the base of these clouds, and it really starts to make them pop. I think that's really where the contrast in the sky really starts to just take hold. Yeah, sometimes I have a tendency to overwork things, and in hindsight I almost wish I would have just stopped the sky right there, right here, but I'm happy with how the painting did end up. Those last little bits of highlights, maybe they were a little bit too much. I wish I would have kept a little bit more shadow in the sky, but I think in the end it turned out really, really well. There I am just blending out all the hard edges. I like to make sure that the clouds around the outside of the painting are really soft, and only the clouds right in the center of the focal area are the ones that have kind of any kind of sharp features. And here I am getting started on this kind of back mountain. These were actually some really fun mountains to paint. These mountains have really kind of unique spiky features to them, and because it's such a kind of a cloudy painting, I was able to really kind of play with the atmosphere in these back ones. And what I have here is I just have this really kind of pathetic I have this pathetic filbert brush that I use just to really scrub paint into the canvas. The bristles are probably about a quarter of an inch long by this point, so 90% of the bristles on that brush have been worn away from 2 years of using it just for scrubbing. And here I am going into some highlights, some a little bit of brown ochre highlights, just making sure to, in order to make this mountain not kind of look like other mountains, make it look more of a fantasy mountain, try to make the features kind of almost cathedral like, making sure that these highlights are tall and long and tall. And in order to accentuate that, make sure that add just a little bit of shadow. It was hard with these because I didn't want to add any shadow to this back mountain, because usually when you add shadows to these back mountains it brings them forward. And I wanted that mountain to be pretty far away, but I was able to solve it by kind of blending it out. You see me there blending it out a little bit, and adding that fog at the bottom really helped to push it back again after I added the shadows. And now this is where kind of the real heft of the painting kind of starts. There's this big grassy kind of cliff that's kind of jutting off to the side here. And this is me with that pathetic filbert brush again, and I'm just scrubbing it in with making sure to keep my saturation really low here again to emphasize depth in this painting. So going in with some greens. I think I'm using sap green here, and whatever was in my sky. Here you can see me going in the base of the mountain. I'm trying to be as colorful as I can, so you see that I was using some brown, some red, black, all that stuff in the base of that mountain. And here I am just making sure, again, that I'm scrubbing out, all that excess paint. When I paint, I like to paint all in one session or in one layer. So I don't, I'm an impatient man. I don't like to sit around and wait for this oil paint to dry. So I'll just paint the whole thing in one go. So after I get that big mountain feature kind of based in, I'm going in with this is a flat synthetic brush, and I'm really defining the edge features really well. That's what makes a really good mountain. I think, is having edges that are really, really well defined. So if you see, sometimes when you see mountains and they kind of have fuzzy edges, it just doesn't look that good. So here I am just putting in some of the highlights for these kind of pokey spires, I guess is what we're calling them. Yeah, this is definitely not a mountain that you want to go base jumping on. You're going to get impaled one wrong move, but yeah, I initially went a little bit, I think, high in value on these spires. I think that they looked a little whitewashed when I first started, and I had to fiddle with them for just a little bit. Sometimes it's like that with painting. You just gotta fiddle with it. And I added some shadow. You can see me there, added some cracks. I added some blue to the shadows. I love adding kind of blue to the backs of shadows, especially on mountains. And you can see me there just kind of almost blabbing. I guess that's not even a word, blabbing. Just kind of smashing my brush in and just kind of darkening it a little bit, just adding some interest and texture into the face. And that kind of did it. And after that, I was happy with it. And then I came in on the base and added some shadows right into the base of these spires. Yeah, these spires. And I decided that I wanted to make the outlines of these a little bit more defined. So I decided to go in with that really bright highlight, and then a second ago I had that really dark shadow on those ones on the back. And I only am putting this highlight on the peaks of really high interest right in the middle. I'm not putting these on all of the peaks. That really loses its effect if you put them on all of them. And I may, I have a tendency to go overboard. Maybe I did a little bit too much, maybe not, but I really like how it turned out. I really like the final effect. I'm finally done with the mountain, and I get to put in the shadow for the mountain. I tell you what, everything starts looking better once you start putting in these cast shadows. If something doesn't look right, if you're working on a painting and you're just like, something doesn't look right, I don't know what's going on, just put a shadow on it. And it doesn't even matter. Just put a shadow on it, and it'll look a million times better. And that's exactly what happened with this mountain. It was looking all right. But once I put that shadow on, man, it really came to life. Now, my favorite detail about this shadow, and one detail that I think a lot of people are going to miss that look at this painting, is if you look at the shadow, you can see that I actually painted in spires in the shadow, little pokey spires. And I made sure while painting the shadow and also while painting this grass here in the front, made sure to follow this kind of like curved shape to it. And also painting that grass in the front, I decided to make that little divot just a little bit darker than the part of the cliff that's jutting out, because that part that's jutting out is going to be getting hit by a bunch of sun. And I think that really accentuates, that sun effect on those cliffs in the back that you can see me painting now. I decided that I wanted to add a little bit more contrast because I wanted to add some highlights to those cliffs on the back, and what the value was already. In order to add any highlights to it, I would have to make it white, and I don't want to whitewash it because I had just been fighting with a whitewashed mountain, and so I decided to make the values a little bit darker in the back so I could add these kind of nice highlights, and that increased the saturation a little bit. But you know what, I kind of like the way that it turned out. I like it because it adds color variation, and color variation is always something that I try to strive for in my painting. It's not something that I always get in my paintings. It's something that I always try to improve while I paint. But I really like the way that light hitting those turned out. And then here, this is where adding the shadow to the mountain really made the mountain pop. Adding these shadows to this part of the cliff is really what makes these grassy cliffs pop out quite a bit too. These are so much fun to paint too. Because they're so easy. You just add in like a dark base shadow, and then you come in with a mid-tone. So in this case, it was like a kind of a browny gray, and you just come in with some sort of choppy stroke and just kind of slap paint on however you want. And then once you're done with that, you just take some white and some ochre, maybe a little bit of yellow, and just put some highlights on there and call it a day. And after I added some highlights to those cliffs, I decided I needed a little bit more grass highlights, and so I added some. And so now I start working on this first kind of sloping hill down. My favorite thing about this painting is the geometry of this painting. So if you look at the line shape of this painting, you got almost these perpendicular, they're not quite perpendicular, but almost perpendicular lines to each other in the shapes of these hills and mountains. And I just really like it a lot. This is probably my favorite composition that I've ever come up with, which is why I've painted it twice. This is actually my second time that I've painted it. The first time that I painted it was when I was very, very early started painting it, back when I was painting still with the Bob Ross wet on wet style. But yeah, I just really, really love this composition. But what I'm doing now is I based in that hill with bright on the outside or on the top and kind of dark as you go down. And because I have wet paint, I can just take some paint on my fan brush and I can just tap in some grass. And with a lot of paint on the brush when I start, I can tap on the top and work my way down. And as I work my way down, I lose paint. And so I can get this really nice almost shadow for free just by getting in that nice base. And now I'm using again that that pathetic filbert brush and as many colors as I can. I'm really trying. One of the really nice features of this painting is the grass, and I'm really trying as hard as I can to get as many nice colors into the grass, specifically that golden ochre color. That golden ochre in the grass is just such a nice color to have here. And I'm also making sure that my corners and my base is really, really, really dark. And that just helps with the lighting so much. That helps with my lighting so much. The cliffs here, I'm doing the same way that I did the cliffs in the background, except I'm just spending a little bit more time and doing them in a little bit more detail, and I'm adding more cracks with the black. And here in a minute, I'm just going to start doing the exact same thing as I did with the other hill with the fan brush and the grass, making sure that I am adding just as many tones of grass, as many values, as many hues as I possibly can. I'm adding green. I'm adding this kind of bright yellow white. I decided that back hill needed a little bit of oomph, so I added some more shadow to it. I added some darker greens. I added some ochres. I added some cracks to that hill there, and really now is when you can see the painting really starting to come together. And now I started working on this path, and kind of the geometry again of this path sloping into the painting just adds so much more interest, I think, to this painting. The first time that I did this, the path was kind of meh. It just kind of meandered into the painting. This time I really made it slope way into the painting. Like it's really really in your face about how it does it, and it's kind of an odd shaped slope, but I do rather like it. Making sure to add a lot of really interesting bumps of grass on the edges of the path too. Adds for a lot of interesting places to add light. Making sure that path goes all the way out into the distance, adds perspective, forces the perspective of that mountain, and then adds little blades of grass. Again, just those little details, and then you can see me adding that vignetting effect that I just love to add so much. And this is the painting when it's done. So thank you so much for watching, and if you liked the video, please let me know. Leave a comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you.